You step outside. The sky above you is enormous. Not the sky you know, not the washed out gray blue haze sitting above a city, not the narrow strip of atmosphere visible between buildings. The real sky, black, absolute, burning with so many stars that the darkness between them looks wrong, like a mistake. This is what night looked like for almost every human who ever lived. For roughly 300,000 years, before a single electric bulb existed, before gas lamps, before even widespread candle use, the Milky Way was not a photograph. It was just the sky. Every night. Unavoidable. The kind of sky that makes you feel your own smallness, like a physical weight pressing down on your chest. You have probably never seen that sky. Almost no one living today has. The world your ancestors were born into was not a quieter version of this one. It was a different world entirely. The landmasses were recognizable, but the details were alien. The air was different. The sounds were different. The animals were different. The colors of the horizon, the density of the forests, the depth of the rivers, all of it was calibrated to a version of Earth that modern humans have almost completely erased. So what did it actually look like? Let us go back, not metaphorically. Let us actually reconstruct what your eyes would have seen, what your nose would have caught in the air, what your ears would have processed in the silence, standing on this planet as a fully modern human roughly 70,000 years ago. Start with the most disorienting fact of all. The Earth was not full. In the year 70,000 BCE, the total human population of the planet was somewhere between 10,000 and 100,000 individuals. Geneticist Marcus Feldman and his colleagues at Stanford have studied the bottleneck in human genetic diversity that points to this period a near-extinction event, possibly triggered by the eruption of the Toba supervolcano, what is now Sumatra. The population may have crashed to just a few thousand breeding adults. Humans were, by any measure, a rare animal, rarer than lions, rarer than elephants. A scattered handful of small groups clinging to survival on a planet that did not know they existed. What does an empty Earth feel like? Imagine walking for days, weeks, without encountering another human being. Not because you are lost, because there is no one else. No roads, no paths beaten by foot traffic, no ruins or middens, no fire rings left by strangers. Just land that has never been organized by human intention, in any direction as far as your legs can carry you. The forests were different then. Paleobotanist Cynthia Stager and others studying ancient pollen records, tiny grains preserved in lake sediments for tens of thousands of years, have mapped what vegetation covered the continents during different periods of prehistory. The pattern is striking. During glacial periods, the great tropical forests we associate with Africa and South America shrank dramatically. Savannas and grasslands expanded. Vast stretches of what is now the Amazon basin were dry woodland. The Congo was broken by corridors of open grassland. The Sahara, which today is the largest hot desert on Earth, was during wetter periods between ice ages transformed into a green, lake-studded landscape called the Green Sahara, also known as the African Humid Period, supporting hippos, crocodiles, and abundant human settlement in areas that are now pure sand. The ground your ancestors walked was not constant. It shifted across their lifetimes and dramatically across generations. Now stand somewhere your ancestors actually stood. The Blombos Cave, in what is now the Western Cape of South Africa, is one of the most important archaeological sites on the planet. Humans sheltered there roughly 75,000 to 100,000 years ago. Step outside that cave in your mind. The coastline stretches away from you. But here is something strange. During the height of the last glacial maximum, roughly 20,000 years ago, so much of the planet's water was locked in glacial ice that sea levels dropped by more than 120 meters, roughly 400 feet below where they sit today. The continental shelves were exposed. Land bridges connected islands. Walking south from Blombos, you would cross terrain that is now underwater. The ocean's edge was miles further out than it sits today. The entire map of the coastline was different. What this means is that much of where ancient humans actually lived, the coastal camps, The river deltas, the estuary settlements that would have been most attractive for early human populations who relied on shellfish and marine resources, is now beneath the sea. Archaeologist John Erlinson at the University of Oregon has spent decades arguing that this fact profoundly distorts our understanding of early human coastal behavior. The evidence is mostly drowned. Look up during the day. The sun behaves the same. But the light that falls through an old-growth forest, a forest that has never been cut, that has grown for thousands of uninterrupted years, is not the light of a managed woodland. It is filtered, layered, broken into shafts by a canopy so dense that the forest floor sits in a kind of permanent green twilight. The trees are bigger than anything most people alive today have seen outside of a nature reserve. The silence under them is deep, punctuated by sounds that no longer exist in most of the world. The calls of megafauna, large animals moving through undergrowth at a scale that makes the ground tremble faintly under your feet. Because the animals were different. This is the part that shakes people most viscerally. During the Pleistocene epoch, the geological period running from about 2.6 million years ago to roughly 11,700 years ago, Earth hosted a megafauna, meaning a collection of enormous animals of breathtaking diversity and size. Woolly mammoths across the northern steppes and tundra. Cave lions larger than any modern lion stalking across Europe. Woolly rhinoceroses. Short-faced bears in North America, standing 12 feet tall on their hind legs and capable of running faster than any modern bear. Giant ground sloths in South America the size of elephants. In Australia, a marsupial lion called Thylacoleo carnifex with a bite force greater than any living predator of comparable size. Your ancient ancestors did not live in a world without large predators. They lived in a world absolutely saturated with them. Paleoanthropologist Robert Foley at the University of Cambridge has written extensively on how this predator density shaped early human behavior, how the presence of these animals fundamentally constrained where humans could sleep, when they could move, how they organized their groups. You did not wander casually at night. You did not sleep on the ground alone. Fire was not a luxury, it was a perimeter. What did those predators sound like? The roar of a cave lion carrying across a dark plain. The cracking of branches as a mammoth herd moved through a forest. Sounds that activated something ancient in your nervous system. The part of your brain that is not modern, that is not rational, that simply floods with adrenaline and compresses the world to a single, sharp point of awareness. You heard those sounds. They were real. Now look at the landscape in a different season, because the seasons were not what they are now either. During the glacial maximum, ice sheets covered much of northern Europe and North America, and the climate patterns across the unglaciated regions were profoundly altered. Researcher Brian Huntley at Durham University, studying paleoclimatic records, has shown that the temperature gradient between the equator and the poles was steeper than today, meaning the tropics were cooler and the temperate regions were dramatically colder. Monsoon systems that today bring rain to South Asia operated differently. The jet streams shifted. Storms moved on paths that no longer exist. If you stood on the edge of the Eurasian steppe during the last glacial maximum, you would look out across what researchers call the Mammoth Steppe, a vast cold grassland stretching from Western Europe all the way to the eastern tip of Siberia and across the land bridge into Alaska. This was the largest single ecosystem on Earth. Flat, wind-scoured, numbingly cold, but rich in grass and therefore rich in grazing animals, and therefore rich in predators, including humans. It looked in some ways like a cold version of the African savanna. Nothing grows very tall, the sky is vast, the horizon is always visible, you can see threats coming from a long distance, and threats can see you. Now contrast that with the experience of your ancestors who lived in the deep interior of old-growth forest. No horizon, no line of sight longer than a few dozen meters. Navigation by memory and by subtle signals, the slope of the ground, the direction of water sound, the smell of a particular plant species, the behavior of birds overhead. Anthropologist Elizabeth Marshall Thomas, who spent time with the Jew Honzi San people of the Kalahari in the 1950s, described how effortlessly they read landscape signs that she was completely unable to perceive entire layers of information written into the environment that modern humans have lost the ability to decode. This is perhaps the most important thing to understand about what Earth looked like to ancient humans. It was not a backdrop. It was a text. Every feature of the landscape was a sentence in a language they had been reading since childhood. The direction, a river bend. The specific shade of green on a plant after rain. The absence of birdsong in a section of forest. None of this was scenery. It was information. Survival critical information. Read continuously, without conscious effort, the way you read a screen, without thinking about the act of reading. You have inherited that capacity. It is still in you. Put you in a wild landscape for long enough, and something old starts to switch back on an attentiveness, a sharpening, a mode of perception that modern life has no use for but never fully deleted. Go back to that sky. The Milky Way arching overhead. No light pollution, no sound of traffic. A fire burning low. The smell of wood smoke and damp earth, and the animal smell of your group sleeping close together for warmth and safety. This was not primitive. This was the full, unfiltered experience of being a human animal on a living planet. Your brain, which is identical in capacity to the brain of every person reading these words, was built for that world, not this one. It was calibrated by millions of years of evolution to navigate, read, and survive inside a version of Earth that no longer exists. You step outside. The sky above you is enormous, but not the right sky, not the one your ancestors knew. Somewhere between their world and yours, we traded the stars for streetlights. We traded the sound of megafauna for the sound of engines. We traded 120 meters of exposed coastline for cities, now sitting where the shoreline used to be. The Earth did not change. We did, and the world we built replaced the one that made us.